Black woman asked to give up VIP seat to white passenger. One call and the whole team got fired. The announcement echoed through the terminal with the crisp precision only a first-class gate could offer. Flight 304 to Chicago. Final boarding call for first-class passengers. The voice was calm, sterile, rehearsed. But as Leona stepped forward, there was something in her that made the world slow down just a beat. A subtle shift in air. Her presence didn't demand attention, it simply commanded it. She moved through the priority gate with quiet confidence. Her ivory-colored suit, tailored with surgical precision, moved like second skin with every step she took. Not a wrinkle, not a thread out of place. Her heels struck the floor softly, rhythmically, but her posture was what truly announced her. Upright, steady, dignified. Her skin was deep brown, and her eyes, sharp, unwavering, held the calm intensity of someone who had seen too many battles to be surprised by turbulence. And yet, within that still gaze, a fire remained. Controlled. Focused. Alive. Seat 1A. Front row. First class. Window. Spacious. Quiet. She placed her small carry-on into the overhead bin with efficiency, no wasted motion. She sat, crossed one leg over the other, buckled in. Her fingers moved with certainty as she tapped open her tablet, eyes scanning the final draft of a presentation she had perfected over the past 2 months. Everything had been prepared. Every slide aligned. Every word measured. She wasn't just flying to Chicago. She was flying to finalize a deal that could shift entire industries, a merger worth nearly $500 million. And she was the lead. There was no room for mistakes. No time for distractions. Not even a minute for nonsense. She adjusted the brightness of the tablet screen and was halfway through reviewing the third quarter growth chart when the rhythm of the cabin shifted. Sharp clicks of heels, louder, heavier, quicker. They struck the carpet like a metronome of entitlement. Leona didn't look up at first. She had heard that sound before. Then came the perfume. Loud, artificial, sweet in a way that tried too hard. The woman who entered wore a form-fitting red blazer, her platinum blonde hair curled with pageant precision. Her lips were painted a red too bold for comfort, and her sunglasses stayed on despite the absence of sunlight. She was followed closely by another woman dressed like a fashion magazine spread come to life. Tight dress, heavy jewelry, careless laughter that didn't belong in a quiet cabin. They stopped. The blonde's expression turned to stone. There in seat 1A sat Leona. The woman's voice sliced through the air like a cold blade. Not loud, but sharp and meant to be heard. Excuse me, but I think you're in the wrong seat. This is 1A. I'm a diamond member, highest tier. That seat's reserved for me. Leona looked up slowly, eyes steady, unreadable. Her tone was smooth, measured, respectful, but firm. I reserved this seat 3 weeks ago. You might want to double-check your ticket. The woman let out a dry laugh, her lips curling into a smirk that didn't quite reach her eyes. I fly this route every month. I know where I sit. I don't need to check anything. Maybe you could help out and switch. My friend and I would like to sit together. Leona didn't move. Her eyes remained calm, like still water that saw deeper than the surface. This is my seat. I have the ticket. If there's any confusion, the flight attendant can confirm it. By now, the mood in the cabin had shifted. The noise from boarding dulled into hushed glances. The friend beside the blonde woman shifted awkwardly, clearly not used to resistance. Not used to no. The attendant arrived, her smile faltering the moment she saw the standoff. She looked at Leona, then at the blonde, then quickly pulled out her scanner. One moment, please. May I see your boarding pass? Leona offered it with no extra words. The woman, still standing, reluctantly handed hers over as well. The beep was quiet. The pause after it was not. Seat 1A does belong to her. I'm sorry for the confusion. That should have been the end. But entitlement rarely ends quietly. There must be a mistake. I always sit there. You don't understand. I'm loyal to this airline. They know me. The attendant hesitated, then lowered her voice. I understand, ma'am. But the reservation is clear. Perhaps we can arrange another seat. She turned toward Leona, voice dipped into an apologetic whisper, soft but intrusive. Would you be willing to switch to 1C? Just to make things easier. It would really help keep the cabin calm. It wasn't a question. It was the subtle pressure of expectation, a request framed as compromise, but shaped like surrender. Leona didn't flinch. Her voice remained as even as before, but now every word carried weight. I'm sitting in the seat I reserved. I'm not obligated to move just to make someone else feel more comfortable. A breathless silence followed. Somewhere toward the back of the cabin, someone shifted in their seat. The tension had a pulse now. The blonde's friend raised an eyebrow. It was a face unused to obstacles. Then, from the aisle, a new figure entered. Authority walked in with a neat bun, tailor blazer, and a name tag that read Flight Supervisor. Renee. Her eyes scanned the situation in an instant. Her smile was there, but it was rehearsed. Her tone was gentle, but it held a current beneath the surface. We'd really appreciate your cooperation here. It's a small misunderstanding. If you agree to switch, we can offer you extra reward points and a complimentary meal. It wasn't a suggestion. It was institutional muscle dressed in kindness. A way of saying, don't make this harder than it has to be without having to say it out loud. Two women. One with a claim, a voice, and a ticket. One with privilege, expectation, and the assumption that rules could bend for her. And behind it all, a system quietly siding with comfort over correctness. Leona didn't speak immediately. She reached into the inside pocket of her blazer and pulled out her phone. Her fingers moved with purpose. No rush, no panic. I need to report an incident. Flight 304 to Chicago. Seat 1A. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. Her tone was cool, professional. She didn't even look at anyone else. No one heard the response from the other end. But when she ended the call, she simply said, "Thank you. Someone will take care of it." She returned the phone to her pocket. Her tablet still glowed with her open presentation. Her back was straight, her face unreadable, her eyes fixed forward. She didn't speak again. She didn't need to. And though nothing exploded, nothing cracked, something in the cabin shifted. A quiet discomfort now sat with the crew. A growing awareness settled among the passengers. Everyone sensed it. Something had changed. The delay was subtle at first. A simple announcement that the boarding process would be paused for 5 minutes due to an operational check. The technician appeared and had a brief conversation with the pilot. Nothing unusual. Passengers adjusted in their seats. Some checked their watches. Others murmured lightly. But 5 minutes turned into 10. And that silence in the cabin, it was no longer routine. It had texture. Tension layered like static before a storm. Caroline sat rigidly now. Her once relaxed posture, her legs crossed and her chin slightly lifted in that signature air of superiority, began to falter. Her fingers, perfectly manicured and adorned with rings, fidgeted slightly on the handle of her designer tote. She glanced toward the cockpit, then toward the flight attendants who stood nearby, whispering with tight-lipped restraint. The authority she once assumed would back her up had not yet delivered. Her friend leaned toward her, lips close to her ear, whispering something too low for others to catch. But the way Caroline's eyes darted toward Leona and then back to the front of the plane told enough. It was no longer about the seat. It was about something else. Something deeper. The disruption had unsettled an old assumption. That assumption now felt embarrassingly outdated. Leona sat perfectly still in seat 1A. Not a twitch of muscle or flicker of emotion. She stared ahead at the front of the plane, where the door to the cockpit remained closed. Her hands rested calmly on her lap, the corner of her tablet screen still visible from the seat pocket. A document glowed softly. She had not turned it off. She had not said another word. And yet her silence was louder than anything that had passed between them earlier. Then the cockpit door opened. The captain stepped out tall, with streaks of gray at his temples and eyes that looked like they had seen storms above the clouds and conflict below them. He did not hesitate. He did not address the cabin in general or offer platitudes. Instead, he walked the narrow aisle straight to the front, stopping just beside the first row. He looked directly at Leona and gave a nod of respect, small but unmistakable. Then his voice, deep and clear, echoed through the cabin. "Good evening. I'm Captain Reinhardt. I've spoken with headquarters and reviewed the booking records for this flight. I'm here to confirm that seat 1A belongs to Ms. Leona Marshall. There is no dispute. A pause. He turned to face Caroline, whose face had gone several shades paler. Emperor Airline policy, continued the captain. If any passenger refuses to sit in their assigned seat or interferes with boarding procedures, I'm obligated to request they deboard the aircraft. For the safety and comfort of all passengers, we cannot make exceptions. There was no apology in his tone, no attempt to soothe egos or entertain further discussion. It was a pronouncement. Final. Caroline opened her mouth, perhaps to offer another deflection, but her voice came out faint, barely above a whisper. I didn't know she called someone that high up. I thought this was just a seating mix-up. That's all. I didn't mean anything by it. The captain didn't answer. He turned and walked back toward the cockpit, leaving her standing there with the sentence hanging like an unfinished thought. A moment later, with visible reluctance and a tight jaw, Caroline made her way to her assigned seat several rows behind. Her friend followed silently, head down. Peace returned, but it was not the same peace. It was heavier, more aware. The silence now carried memory of what had been attempted and what had been exposed. Leona remained in 1A unmoved. She did not look around for validation. She did not raise an eyebrow or shift her posture. Her calm presence was louder than any retaliation could have been. She reached for her tablet again and resumed reviewing her presentation as though none of it had occurred. But the cabin crew was not so composed. Renee, the flight supervisor, had her phone in hand. A notification pulsed on the screen. She opened it with a swipe. Her eyes scanned a message, then widened just slightly, not in surprise, but in recognition. She pressed a button, made a call, and stepped quickly toward the galley, away from the passenger's eyes. 15 minutes later, across digital channels connecting the flight to ground operations, a message was received. A company-wide directive, forwarded from the office of the airline's Diversity and Ethics Division. Subject: immediate administrative action. It stated the following. Effective immediately, the entire cabin crew of Flight 304 has been placed under administrative review for failure to handle an in-flight seating dispute in accordance with the company's anti-discrimination policies. A substitute crew will be assigned upon landing. All affected staff must report to HR within 24 hours. This action is non-negotiable. No one said her name, but they all knew. No dramatic confrontation. No raised voices. No threats made in public. Just one calm voice on a phone. One presence that would not be moved, not by social pressure, not by bias disguised as courtesy, not by the discomfort of others. Back in her seat, Leona took a slow breath and looked out the window. The plane had begun taxiing. The hum of the engines filled the air like a return to normalcy, but nothing was quite normal anymore. Around her, passengers shifted uneasily. They were not looking at her directly now, not quite. But their awareness had changed. The woman in seat 1A was no longer invisible. She was no longer someone they might mistake for staff or assume to be in the wrong seat. She was now something else entirely. She was the storm they never saw coming. And she didn't need to raise her voice to be heard. Behind her, Caroline stared at the back of Leona's seat, lips pressed together. There was no apology in there, only the weight of realization. That privilege, when confronted with poise and quiet strength, begins to fold under its own fiction. As the wheels lifted from the runway and the plane rose into the night sky, the cabin lights dimmed. Flight attendants moved silently down the aisle with trays and drinks, their movements rehearsed but now laced with caution. Every glance they exchanged was careful, measured. Leona accepted a glass of water, gave a polite nod, then returned to her screen. She had a deal to finalize. $500 million. And the gravity of her work was beyond this flight, beyond this minor turbulence. She was building something that would outlast these moments. Because power is not just in the badge, or the seat, or the uniform. It is in knowing who you are. In walking through the fire and emerging not charred, but sharpened. And in choosing always to hold your ground, no matter how much the air around you trembles. And so the flight continued. But nothing, not the crew, not the passengers, not even the sky above, would forget what had just passed through seat 1A. The aircraft had lifted slowly, trailing behind schedule by nearly 25 minutes. Yet within the cabin, time felt strangely suspended. Conversations had dulled to a low murmur. The earlier tension still hovered like residual smoke. But at the front of the plane, in seat 1A, Leona remained perfectly still, eyes gently closed, her breathing measured like waves on a distant shore. It wasn't fatigue that closed her eyes. It was a choice. The sanctuary of silence, after the clamor of entitlement and misunderstanding, had run its course. Outside her window, the clouds rolled by in soft layers. From this altitude, everything below dissolved into abstraction. Highways became faint lines, buildings became patterns, and noise lost its shape. Up here, above the friction of the world, Leona found stillness not in retreat but in command. Meditation not of passivity, but of poise. Behind her, Caroline had shrunk into herself. Her spine, once stiff with pride, now curved inward like a shell folding against the weight of unseen judgment. She no longer glanced toward Leona. Not once. Her gaze stayed locked on the seat in front of her, or on her hands as they twisted the strap of her purse over and over again. Her friend beside her barely spoke, instead turning toward the aisle every few seconds as though waiting for something. A signal, perhaps, or simply a way out of the shame that had settled over them like an invisible blanket. When the meal service finally began, it was with a quiet professionalism that attempted to restore the rhythm of flight. A new attendant had joined the crew, someone reassigned in haste, summoned to replace those removed only hours earlier. She moved down the aisle with efficiency, but when she reached 1A, her pace changed. She lowered the tray gently onto the table before Leona and offered a subtle nod of acknowledgement. Her voice was soft but clear. "Thank you for your patience. On behalf of our crew, I want to express our regret for what you experienced earlier. It should not have happened." Leona opened her eyes. She didn't respond immediately. Then, with a calm that neither dismissed nor indulged, she nodded once in return. "Thank you," was all she said. It was not a moment of victory. She did not need it to be. It was not about being right in front of others. She had learned long ago that the most profound power does not arrive with fanfare. It arrives with restraint, with discipline, with knowing you have every reason to explode and choosing instead to hold the storm inside your chest like a fire you've already mastered. She turned her gaze back to the window as the sky stretched wider before her. The sun was starting to slip lower now, casting a soft gold over the clouds. There was beauty here, but there was also truth. Truth that those who believe they are above others because of skin or class or comfort have never truly known the fall. They have never clawed upward from the dust. They have never had to rebuild respect with nothing but their name and a locked jaw. And that's what made people like Leona resilient in ways no privilege could ever imitate. For many on that flight, the remaining hours passed without event. Yet beneath the ordinary hum of the engines and the occasional clink of cups, something quieter was shifting. A recalibration of how the world was perceived, especially for those who had witnessed, in real time, what dignity looked like when it was tested, and what silence could accomplish that shouting never could. Caroline didn't touch her meal. She sat in discomfort not from the seat, but from the weight of unspoken consequence. Her mind raced with words she could have said differently, tones she could have softened, assumptions she should have questioned. But regret, once realized too late, becomes a private courtroom with no one left to argue your side. Elsewhere in a cabin, eyes drifted toward Leona from time to time, some out of curiosity, others with a kind of quiet admiration. No one approached her. No one dared. Not because she was untouchable, but because there was a certain reverence that had settled around her presence. Not forced, not theatrical. Just felt. Later, as the cabin lights dimmed and passengers began to settle in for the remainder of the journey, Leona continued to work. Her screen glowed again, a document open, numbers, strategies, a signature page half-filled. It was a contract. A large one. The kind that would determine not just revenue, but legacy. She wasn't doing it to prove something to the people behind her. She wasn't doing it to win an invisible argument or to reclaim lost ground. She was doing it because this was what she did. She negotiated. She built. She led. And all the while, she carried herself with the certainty of someone who had nothing to prove and everything to protect. It was almost poetic, in a way, that above the clouds, in a place where the earth's lines blurred and the distinctions of race and rank grew small, the truest definition of strength revealed itself. Not in dominance, not in volume, but in composure. And as the flight made its slow descent toward its destination, with the city lights beginning to twinkle below like a blanket of stars fallen to earth, the cabin stirred once more. The captain's voice came on the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent. Thank you for your patience and understanding today. We hope your journey was comfortable, and we look forward to welcoming you again." Routine words. But this was not a routine flight. For some, it had been a journey through air. For others, a journey through awareness. Caroline said nothing as they landed. Her friend clutched her bag and avoided eye contact with nearly everyone. When the plane taxied to the gate and the seatbelt sign blinked off, passengers stood slowly. One by one, they collected their belongings and stepped into the aisle. Politeness returned. Soft thank yous were whispered. Smiles exchanged, but not toward 1A. And still, Leona remained seated until most had gone. When she finally stood, her steps were unhurried, her back straight. She reached for her bag, placed it over her shoulder, and exited the aircraft as she had entered, without performance, without apology, and without fear. Outside the gate, a man in a dark suit waited for her. He nodded when he saw her approach. No words needed. They walked together toward a waiting car. The door opened. She stepped in. Behind her, within the walls of that plane, something had been dismantled. Not through outrage, not through spectacle, but through presence. Because not all storms arrive with thunder. Some walk in calmly, and when they leave, they take the air with them, and you realize the room will never feel the same again. Final message. Not everyone who speaks loudly is strong, and not everyone who stays quiet is weak. True power needs no display. It shows itself in how we walk into a room, how we face injustice without collapsing, and how we leave, having shifted the ground beneath us without uttering a single unnecessary word. If you found this story powerful or thought-provoking, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new video. We release stories that open hearts and change perspectives, and we'd love for you to be part of this journey. Hit like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.